Starting safety Alohi Gilman had to miss practice on Tuesday with an injury, and we don't know the severity of it yet, but it has shined a light on the lack of depth on the Chargers roster.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 8 seasons now, but this is our 6th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making this your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen to the show wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Today we have to start out on a little bit of a somber note. Unfortunately, we have to talk about Alohi Gilman getting injured and what the fallout from that is going to be. And then we get into J.C. Jackson returning to practice in a full capacity, and he's feeling good, feeling very excited for the joint practices. And then we get to talk about Chris Rumph really coming into his own, looking good and making tons of plays in practice.
Yeah, all things that are great to see as far as, J.C. Jackson and Chris Rumph, but the first part of it is very concerning because Alohi Gilman, who went into last season as, the next safety off the bench after Derwin James and Nazir Adderley, and ended up taking the starting role during the season last year. We were wondering if the Chargers should have more competition for him instead of just kind of giving him the starting role or only having him compete against second-year safety J.T. Woods. But he has turned into an invaluable piece of this Chargers defense. You've heard the coaching staff talk about how much they just trust this dude, how good he is communication-wise, and I think you've finally seen him start to make some splash plays at Chargers training camp this year while getting those starting reps, right? He's been very solid. And now, David, this is a blow because when someone like Alohi Gilman gets hurt like this, and the Chargers' depth situation is a lot of guys who we don't really know about at this point, it's definitely, room for concern.
It certainly is. I think every year you go into training camp, you kind of have an expectation or a little bit of fear in the kind of just in the back of your mind that someone's going to get hurt. And, hopefully it's not at a position where your depth isn't maybe as strong as you were expecting it or wanting it to be. And unfortunately, this is a situation that it really hits you in a spot where I don't feel like you had a lot of confidence going into it to begin with. So you have another guy who is, fixing to come in and play meaningful snaps and be one of your starters at the safety position, at a position was already a cause for concern, is a huge red flag and huge problem at this point in training camp.
And we saw this a little bit with Sebastian Joseph Day, right? Like, he got hurt. We were seeing Bible verses getting posted on social media, and we're like, Seriously? What is going to happen, man? Like, is he done for the year? Like, he's already back in practice. Like, that was last week. He's already back practicing.
Already a thing of the past.
Team drills, right? So, this could end up being nothing. But Fernando Ramirez, who writes for the Sporting Tribune, said that he had a noticeable limp. So that's a little concerning. Daniel Popper from The Athletic said he had a full leg sleeve on. We'll see what happens. I mean, it must have happened on Monday's practice because Monday he was out there in team drills and showing up in the practice report. So something must have happened either at Monday's practice or in between Monday and Tuesday. But Tuesday he was not out there while the rest of the team was in full pad. So that hurts. And what it means is that J.T. Woods basically slides into that spot. That's what Daniel Popper said happened, right? So he's the starting safety next to Derwin James. And we've liked what J.T. Woods has been able to do at camp. He's still a major wild card, right? Yeah. Like, there's been some really good developments there, and there's also been, times he's getting beat for 50-yard touchdowns, and, you're still kind of seeing him learn on the job in real time. Yeah. Maybe the next couple preseason games make us feel a little better about it. Maybe he plays a lot less in the next couple preseason games if it is something more serious with Alohi Gilman. But, David, unequivocally, the part that hurts the most is that we've been talking about this. The everydayers know this is one of the position groups, right, that backup tackle, some other spots we've had some real concerns about the depth at that position. And one of the guys that we talked about bringing in for this spot and made so much sense was John Johnson. And then last week you see him get signed for dirt cheap, which I think really pours salt in the wound.
It really does. And I feel like this should hurt. You see this move being made for the league minimum. For the league minimum, for 1.05 for the veteran league minimum. and you sign a guy who's really perfect for your system, or like you miss out on a guy that's perfect for your system, it just makes it feel so much worse because if you, $1 million, throw $1.5 million at him and then you immediately feel good about that position. It's just insane. I understand it takes two to tango. Obviously, John Johnson would want to have to sign with the Chargers and the Chargers would have to want to sign him. Obviously, I understand that, but it just feels like this is a move that way back in the offseason made way too much sense then. It makes way more sense now, and now you don't have the opportunity to bring him in.
Well, I think the other part of it is like we saw how much the late additions for the Chargers last year paid off in the regular season.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like Kyle Van Noy, Bryce Callahan, Morgan Fox, all those dudes were signed after the draft. So, like, seeing what those dudes did, Bryce Callahan having one of his best seasons ever, Morgan Fox having one of his best seasons ever, Kyle Van Noy figuring things out at the end of the year. I mean, that was a revelation. So I think we expected some of the same, and this was just the one that made so much sense. I mean, obviously the asking price was nothing. The Chargers are in a much better situation right now than the Rams as far as competing. If the money's the same, if the location's the same, why would he not go there, especially with the guy that got him paid in Cleveland before he finally got exiled out of there, the guy he had his best season with? All the stars aligned for the Chargers to bring in John Johnson, who not only helps you just as a straight-up safety, and you could still have Alohi Gilman in the mix because Derwin James moves around so much. But the other thing is he helps you in the slot. He's a dude that has been the green dot for this defense in the past. There's no ramp-up period. Obviously, I'm sure there's some different changes and some wrinkles and things, but he would come in and not have any of the issues that you would have bringing in a guy off the streets who has no knowledge of your system. It just made way too much sense for John Johnson to be in the mix here. No matter whether you felt like Alohi Gilman should start or not, he just could help in so many different ways. And I get if they're high on JT Woods, but what that also means, David, is that Mark Webb is now the next guy up after that, because JT Woods was already going to get snaps even as the third safety. When Derwin James moves play linebacker or edge rusher, you need two more safeties back there. And before, that was JT Woods and Alohi Gilman and Derwin James all on the field together at the same time. Now, that fourth guy is a guy we weren't even sure if is going to make the roster and might still even be in a battle to make the roster. But it does look like, from what Daniel Popper said in those rotations, it's Mark Webb kind of winning that safety four battle right now above Raheem Lane.
Yeah, he's the one that you saw kind of start the game with JT Woods as far as the first preseason game is concerned. And I think we all know that the coaching staff and Brandon Staley in particular has a kind of a soft spot for Mark Webb. I mean, he's a guy that he took in the later rounds that saw as kind of a project, a guy that, he saw a lot of traits, liked where he went to school, like the production that he was able to provide, like that he was able to move around and be versatile, play in the box, play back deep, be able to maybe line up at corner in a pinch, play star. I mean, Mark Webb was the guy that, Brandon Staley was wanting to deploy and put everywhere. And so, he just hasn't been able to get out there because of injuries. Injuries is no longer a concern, at least at this point, for Mark Webb. So for us, especially now with this this injury, you hope that Mark Webb is able to go out there in these next two preseason games, in these joint practices, and show out and be able to ball out and be able to give everybody a little bit more confidence in his ability going into the season.
Yeah, and hopefully, it doesn't turn into more than that, right? Because like if it is something serious with Alohi Gilman, and now you have Derwin James, JT Woods, Raheem Lane, and Mark Webb as your safeties going into the season, like that's just not a group I feel like you could be confident in, right? Like there's one guy in that group that has like more than 100 defensive snaps in his career, and it's Derwin James, I would say Mark Webb, hey, first year of Staley's drafting, they went and took this guy. They liked him a lot. They love Georgia players because of the way they teach their defenders, all of that stuff. Brandon Staley called him out for his run defense specifically by saying the pass game's never been an issue with him. So we haven't really seen how that has progressed at this point. I'm sure we'll see a lot more of him in the upcoming preseason games, but it is a guy that Brandon Staley obviously liked, and he has been hurt his first two seasons. So we'll see what happens. You did have undrafted free agent A.J. Finley making his kind of first big play, got an interception off Justin Herbert, but it does feel like safety 4 right now, which could be a very, very important position for this team, is being led by Mark Webb. But I think one of the things that would make you feel a little bit better about the secondary is if you knew the guy that's getting paid the most in the secondary was going to be back. Well, I mean, I guess Derwin James is that guy, but at least at cornerback, J.C. Jackson made his way back to practice. A little setback, but great to see him out there. Not just out there, but making plays. So we're going to talk about the return of J.C. Jackson and the game slowing down for him a little bit in year 2, coming up right after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about Nutrafol. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole-body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair, no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement that's clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. The best part about Nutrafol is that it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplements. So take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. Right now, for a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, well, let's talk about some good news on the injury front, everydayers. And I mean, luckily, we haven't had to talk about these things more than we have, right? I mean, the Chargers have been pretty good this season, knock on wood, obviously, but that's the whole thing with this team. And that's why it's always been such an issue, and such a storyline for this team, is because it keeps happening to major players. But it was nice to see a major player get back in the fold this week with #1 corner, at least, in pay. J.C. Jackson getting back on the field. And David, this has been kind of a weird thing because we saw J.C. Jackson working his butt off, right, in the offseason.
Very much so.
Lived in the training facility, did about as much as you could to get back from an insane, patellar tendon rupture to get back on the field as early as he has.
Yeah.
But then, after, being all go day 1 at Chargers training camp, we saw him miss some time. I think it was 10 days he missed. Now he was back on practice this week on Monday, and back in team drills and even making some plays, David. And I think that's a huge step for this Chargers defense, is potentially, keeping it alive. Hey, we might get this guy back to be a game changer on this defense.
Yeah. J.C. Jackson had to stay out a little bit after dealing with some normal soreness, which is what he said it was. He said he just had to give it a couple of days and be able to let it cool down and get back to feeling good again. And then, he's back in practice, which is great. He was full go. I mean, it wasn't just him in individual drills. He was out there in team drills as well. Yeah. Seemed to be in very, very good spirits, which is good. I mean, that's what you want for J.C. Jackson coming off of just a horrendous injury and just a very, very tumultuous and very tough recovery of having to come back from this injury. So for him, you just want to, make sure that, he's out there feeling good, feeling confident, not having to think about the injury, being able to go out there and play fast.
Yeah, because like we've talked about so many times before, like it's not just about J.C. Jackson getting back, right? It's about J.C. Jackson getting back and looking like the player the Chargers thought they were signing when they made him one of the highest paid corners in the NFL. And it's not all about money, right? But like if you're not getting any production or anything out of that kind of percentage taken out of your salary cap, it's just hard to have a good defense around that when you're not getting anything from the guy that's, one of the highest paid players at his position. So getting him back, seeing him, shut down Quentin Johnston at Monday's practice, seeing that he could be back for the joint practice against the Saints to really, I think, get a good test, right? Going up against guys like Michael Thomas and Chris Olave, some of those guys where I think we'll really see some, guys get tested. Excited to talk about that tomorrow too, because there's going to be some really, really good matchups in these joint practices. But I did think it was interesting though, David, even though he hasn't been on the field a lot since his injury, right? Last year, in the season, he ended up having the injury, and really we just saw him at the beginning of training camp finally get back on the field, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing he did get was a lot of time in the classroom, and it seems like that is actually, being in his second year in Brandon Staley's defense, maybe that's another reason to kind of have some hope that this guy is actually going to improve even coming off of a devastating injury.
Yeah, because, one of the things that he could do a lot, which unfortunately was not to get on the field, but was to get into books, get into the playbooks, and really get with the coaches and really try to zero in on that controllable, right? And really try to feel comfortable, because last year he's coming into a new place where it's a completely new defense, not just any defense, a very, very difficult defense to learn, and he was probably just, playing off of his natural physical ability. But this year, it seems like things are starting to slow down. He said, this year, I feel like I'm at home. I'm playing way faster. You can tell that I'm on it. The coach says the call. I'm already on it. I get it this year. I just get it. I understand it. So you match a guy who has tremendous ball skills, a guy who really didn't understand what he was doing out there in the defense. You mix that rare talent with the intimate understanding of how the defense works. Now you have the type of corner that you were expecting to have, a guy that can go out there and not think, go play fast, and lock down the number one wide receivers, because that's what the coaching staff is expecting of him.
Yeah, and it was nice to hear the coaching staff back him up on that, right?
Yeah.
Defensive coordinator Derek Ansley on Monday said everything is slowing down for him. Last year, everything was brand new. Year 2, the multiples are shrinking, and he can just go out there and be him and cover the number one receiver and be the guy that we know that he can be. Derek Ansley also said today, I think, was the most reps that he's gotten since we started training camp. He's feeling good. So this is all great news because, like we saw last year, a setback can turn into something more, and you never know when you're going to see that guy back in action.
Yeah.
So to see him getting in these team drills, being in the most physical parts of practice is what's going to give you the most confidence. And me and David talked about yesterday, too. The Chargers also get a full week in between their bye week or their last preseason game, right? They get a mini bye week between their last preseason game and the first game of the season. There's one more free football-less weekend that we'll have to go through before things actually kick back into action. So there's still some time, right? We're still about a month out from actually the first game happening when things actually count. A lot of time for him to get back into the rhythm of things. A lot of time for hopefully Alohi Gilman to get back. But I would say, David, the cornerback position, though, without him, you still feel decent about.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think you feel really good about Asante Samuel Jr. and Michael Davis being your outside corners, right? Yeah. And I think at least for a short term, even though the sample size is still incredibly small for Jasir Taylor, you feel like, hey, at this point going into year 2, he can give you enough to where he's not going to totally derail the defense, and he's a guy that is playable, right? Which is a lot of times all you're looking for from that next guy.
Well, and hey, what a meteoric rise for him, too, just considering where he was last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was a guy that was a 6th-round pick that was, just looked at as maybe a throw-in, a guy that has some measurables.
Special teams
traits.
player. Yeah.
Right, a special teams guy. We'll see what we can get out of him. I mean, if he goes out there and plays on special teams and makes plays, great. If he goes out there on defense and he makes plays, then that's fantastic. You're getting great value. And, he went out there and had a performance that made the coaching staff think that maybe he's a guy that can be a starter for them. And so I feel like for him, he's done a great job. I mean, it's definitely a tip of the hat to him for being able to make himself valuable. And even Dean Leonard too. Dean Leonard's made some plays this offseason. The ball skills are there. The pass breakups are there. The speed is very, very real. When you have with Dean Leonard, it's all about the measurables. If you can really mold that and really, kind of teach him some of those things, turn your head around, look for the football. I mean, the absolute traits are there, and they just jump off the page. And
both guys should have had an interception, in the first.
Dean Leonard's was
game.
A pick 6. He would have walked in.
Dean Leonard's was a pick 6. Jasir Taylor had what should have been a pick jumping onto another route that wasn't even his guy. I mean, both the guys showed some good ball skills in the first preseason game. I mean, Jasir Taylor did give up a touchdown, but still had pretty tight coverage there. But I do think in years past, there's a lot more question marks. Having Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard be, backups for you last year, reserve players last year as rookies, was a lot more, I was more skeptical of it than I am this year with those guys going into year 2 and having shown a little bit. But everything gets a little better if J.C.
Guys
Jackson's
that have developed,
the
they've shown some development, right? And I think that's
Absolutely.
one of the things with this coaching staff that, you have to definitely say that that's one of the things that they brought to the table. I mean, they've been able to find guys and they've been able to develop them and turn them into to good players at the NFL level.
And, I mean, just foundationally speaking, like if you're finding guys that can contribute in your 6th and 7th picks, right, those guys, hey, really could be special teams players. Anything after that is kind of bonus when you're spending that late of picks on those guys. Like, those guys are turning into meaningful role players for you. That's great. If they can be starters, that's how great teams are built. When you can keep hitting on those late picks and not just have total flameouts that can't even get on the field. And we just saw too many of those for too many years. But I do think that for this group of corners, like I feel really good about it. If J.C. Jackson can be out there and just be any kind of resemblance of what the top of his game looked like, it's going to be a really, really dangerous secondary, especially if the Chargers pass rush can get right. I mean, last year without Joey Bosa, the Chargers had one of the worst pass rushes in the entire NFL. This year, somebody has emerged that's not Joey Bosa, that's not Khalil Mack, that could be making a big difference in the pass rush department, and it's Chris Rumph, who not only had a great preseason game, but is backing it up with more good practices. So we're going to talk about Chris Rumph in the pass rush coming up right after this. All right, David. Well, I first want to just thank the Everydayers for checking out the show. As always, if you guys want to get your questions in tomorrow, we will be getting into some Chargers mailbag, as well as getting into joint practices, because we love joint practices always, and we're excited about some of the matchups because the Saints do have some good players and some good matchups. We'll even see our old buddy Derek Carr slinging the pill around at Chargers joint practices this week. So we'll be here for you guys to break down everything that happens, but tomorrow we're talking about the biggest matchups and getting into some of your questions. I do want to talk about Chris Rumph, though. He's a guy that, to me, was one of the dudes who really jumped off the page the most to me in the Chargers' first preseason game. The Chargers had a great pass rush. A lot of guys played really well, but there was one guy who, as David would say, was like a man amongst boys, and it was Chris Rumph, right? 7 pass rushing snaps. He almost had 2 sacks in the game. 1 sack, 2 total pressures. And it's nice to see, according to Daniel Popper, he kind of kept things going at Tuesday's practice, making some more plays, and really, I think, stacking those successes on top of each other, right? It's not about just flashing at this point. You want to see some consistent success. And it seems like we're starting to see a little bit of that with third-year pass rusher Chris Rumph.
And I'm happy for it. I'm here for it. I like the fact that we get some positive movement for Chris Rumph. You know, he's a guy that just feels like he's always been close. You know, he's always been close to making plays, but he hasn't really been able to finish it. That's kind of changed a little bit this year. You notice he's a little bit bigger. He looks like he's a little bit more imposing out there. And in the first preseason game, he absolutely looked like he was one of the most dominant players on the field when he was on the field. Like, he was one of the best players on the field. That was pretty clear to me. The way he was able to put pass rush moves together, the way he was able to translate that speed to power. Chris Rumph looked really, really good. And yeah, he continued that in practice. He had a tackle for loss against Joshua Kelly, according to Daniel Popper of The Athletic in his practice notes. And again, in 11-on-11, he was able to beat Austin Pleasance, the second string right tackle, and was able to actually strip Easton Stick as well. So, I mean, big plays for Chris Rumph. It's really, really nice to see him develop, get better, and hopefully be able to be a productive member of this edge room.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for Chris Rumph is just trying to, round out his overall game. But if you're not where you need to be, you need to bring something exceptionally well. And at least it looks like that's kind of where his pass rush arsenal is going, right?
Yeah.
Feels like he, at least at this point, can be counted on as a situational pass rusher, which is something he wasn't able to do and got an opportunity to do in 2022 when Joey Bosa went down. He got a ton of reps at it. But one of the things that's always been the question is just, is he going to be big enough, right? It started with Joey Bosa in his first training camp, where he was string bean. Then he graduated to asparagus, right? Maybe he's full-blown broccoli at this point. I don't know. But if he's getting a little bit bigger, that is definitely going to pay off. And according to Derek Ansley, he kind of sees it as well. And he thinks that's kind of where some of this explosiveness is coming from. He says the stronger you get, the heavier you get, the more explosive you are on your legs. He's doing a really good job with his speed to power, his hand swipe. He's doing a good job. So to see Chris Rumph, a guy that really was hard to put on the field at times last year, kind of turn into someone that you're going to feel good about going in spells for Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and maybe giving you a little bit more if one of those guys is to miss a few weeks, I think is a great development.
Yeah, I mean, it also looks a little bit more sturdy against the run, a little bit more violent against the run. I think we need to see a little bit more of it. I mean, I'd like to see a little bit more of those opportunities.
I mean, we saw 3 run defense snaps in the preseason, so I'm not going to go as far to, totally sell you guys on him as a good run defender yet.
No, yeah, neither am I. Like I said, I want to see more of that, but I feel like at least with that updated strength and maybe the body in a little bit thicker of a position, he'll be able to put up on the outside. He'll be able to get off blocks a little bit more effectively, and hopefully, that translates in that part of the game. But yeah, I mean, even if he is coming in as a situational pass rush, as a guy that you feel confident and comfortable being able to maybe give a break to some of your other guys, your other starters, be able to help with that rotation, then that's a very, very good thing for the Chargers.
At the end of the day, if you're going to be out there, you have to be able to go out there and win your one-on-one matchup with the tackle and find a way to get pressure and not just get stuck in their belly button, right, and just be taken out of the play. Like,
Right.
we've seen too many times with a lot of the guys that had to come in and try to fill in for Joey Bosa in 2022. I do think, though, that the other big thing, that I don't know if fans kind of think about enough is just the fact that it's like Chris Rumph knows where he's bad. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, that's one of the biggest misconceptions. It's like these dudes are getting it drilled to them every day in meetings, every day at practice. They know where they have to improve. And Derek Ansley also said Chris Rumph is a pro. He knows the things he needs to work on. He attacked those in the offseason, and he came in bigger and stronger. That's a great start because not only does it help you in a situational pass rushing role, it also helps you, hey, if you want to move Joey Bosa inside, you now have a person you feel good about that's an additive to your rush offense, right? To your pass rush. Like, you have a guy you feel like, okay, hey, now you're excited about maybe Chris Rumph and, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and Morgan
you're just
Fox
getting that
on the
much
field
more
at the same
creative,
time.
right? I mean,
It gives you more flexibility. That's the thing, right? Because he's not a total liability in the pass rush department. And kind of like we talked about with Asante Samuel Jr., right? Like, Chris Rumph, you don't have to be the best edge defender and, the run defender at all.
No.
Like, you could be competent at that. We hope you're competent. But, like,
Yeah.
if you're a good enough pass rusher, you're going to be able to get on the field. But, like, what you can't be is an inconsistent pass rusher and a terrible run defender. And at times, that's just what he was, frankly, last year. It seems like that's improving a little bit. And I think it's just hard to, talk about enough what it would mean for this defense if he can come along, right?
Yeah.
Tuli Tuipulotu, really his biggest competition is the next guy on the field if one of these starters goes down. If those two guys can come along with the rest of the group that's rushing the passer right now for the Chargers, like, it just will help everything so much and really, I think, hide a lot of the deficiencies in this Chargers defense.
Well, I mean, Daniel, the best friend of a secondary is a good pass rush. I mean, the less time you got to cover, the better it is going to be for you. And, of course, you rush the quarterback and you get them off their spot and you get them out of their rhythm and you make them throw off their back foot or throw when they're not ready or throw on the run. That's when they make mistakes, and that's when you turn the football over. So that's just playing complementary football. When you have a good edge rushing team that can get pressure constantly, that's going to make everything you do on the defensive side easier and more effective.
And I think that you saw last year, right, when Kyle Van Noy started picking things up a little bit, that's when the defense had a really momentous shift in the season.
No doubt.
You saw them win 4 games in a row, and you saw them, allow 11 points per game over a 4-game streak, even though it was against terrible quarterbacks. It's not lost on me, I promise you. But, like, that's when you saw this team really, really struggle, is when Bosa went down and they had nobody else to help rush the passer. So much time in the pocket for quarterbacks. So many DBs getting left out there to dry, right? And I think when this defense is firing all cylinders, right, the best way for this defense to actually make a major leap, a major improvement in 2023 is the pass rush is better, which is going to make the defensive backs better. But not only make the defensive backs better, David, if you stop the run, you're getting more third and longs. You're helping your pass rushers.
Yep.
What else are you doing? You're giving a few guys on the back end some great opportunities at turning the ball over. You have Derwin James and J.C. Jackson and Asante Samuel Jr. Like,
ball
you have
hawks.
Real ball hawks on the back end, and we haven't really been able to see that all come to its full potential because there hasn't been enough pressure on the passer. And any corner is only going to be able to cover for so long, right? Somebody has to get home eventually. That's why even Tuli, with that motor, is so attractive because it's like eventually you might not get there, the first try, but he's going to keep going. It's not just going to be a stalemate where, guys are just going to let quarterbacks have all the time in the world. So I do think all these things go hand in hand, but if the pass rush can get to a place you feel good about in 2023, I think it's really going to help this defense. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. Thank you to the everydayers who checked it out today. We appreciate you guys as always, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow to talk about joint practices and the matchups we're looking forward to and your questions. If you want to hit us up on X at LockedOnLAC, or you can hit me up at Dan Talk Sports. And David Drogemeyer's DMs are always open at DroTalkSD. You can also find us on Instagram at LockedOnChargers and ask your question. You can ask your question here in the YouTube comments. You can ask the questions on Facebook as well on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. And you can also call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. If you have a 30-second Chargers question, you want to get your voice on the show like good old-fashioned sports radio, you can do that. So make sure you guys hit us up with your questions. We can't wait for these joint practices and also to be back with you guys as always, as we always are tomorrow. So we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.